It was only a few hours after my husband's funeral when his daughter showed up at my doorstep with a locksmith. She stood there in her black dress, eyes cold, and said, "Change all the locks. This house is ours now." As the locksmith started drilling into my front door, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a single key, and handed it to her. She looked down at it, confused at first. Then her face turned white when she realized what that key really belonged to. My name is Nora Whitman, and this is the story of how grief turned into betrayal, and how one key changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. You won't believe how this story ends. The day after the funeral, the house felt painfully quiet. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of my husband, Charles's favorite chair by the window, his reading glasses left on the coffee table, the smell of his aftershave still lingering in the air. For 12 years, this home was our world. We built a life together filled with laughter, warmth, and little everyday routines that now felt like ghosts haunting every corner. Charles had been sick for a while, but even knowing what was coming never prepared me for the emptiness that followed. The phone kept ringing that day, friends checking in, family sending condolences, but their words all blurred together. What do you say to a woman who has just buried her best friend? When the last guest from the funeral reception left, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of untouched tea and stared at his wedding photo. He was smiling in it, that same soft smile that could calm any storm. I could almost hear his voice saying, "Don't worry, Nora. Everything's taken care of." He had told me that often during his illness. He had handled the will, the house, everything. He wanted me to feel safe, and I believed him. I trusted that love, our love, would protect what we built together. That night, I remember lighting a single candle for him and whispering a quiet goodbye. The flame flickered gently, casting a warm glow over the room. For a brief moment, I felt peaceful, as if he was still there. But that peace didn't last long. Just before sunset the next day, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Tires crunching on gravel, two doors slamming, voices I didn't recognize. I stood by the window and saw a black sedan parked crookedly near the front gate. Then I saw her, Rebecca, Charles's daughter from his first marriage. We hadn't spoken since last Christmas when she stormed out of dinner after accusing me of stealing her father's attention. She was 33, independent and successful, but her pride often came before her heart. I opened the door slowly. She was standing there in her black heels and dark coat, her eyes sharp, her jaw set. Beside her stood a man carrying a metal toolbox, clearly a locksmith. "Rebecca," I said quietly, trying to sound calm. "What are you doing here?" She crossed her arms and gave me a look that could freeze stone. "I'm here to secure what's rightfully mine, my father's house." I stared at her, stunned. "Your father's house? This is my home, Rebecca. Charles left it to me." Her expression didn't change. "That's not what I heard. The house belongs to the family, meaning me. So, we're changing the locks tonight." The locksmith looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "maybe you two should talk before I start." Rebecca waved her hand impatiently. "Just do it. I'll deal with her." The man hesitated, but she glared until he bent down and started opening his case. The sound of metal tools clinking against each other filled the air, followed by the harsh whine of a drill. I felt my chest tighten. I stepped closer, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Rebecca, your father and I lived here together. We made this house a home. He wanted me to stay here." She rolled her eyes. "You were married for what, 12 years? My mother was his wife for 25. You think you can just replace her and take everything?" Her words cut deep, but I refused to cry. "This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about love and respect for what he wanted." She crossed her arms again. "Then you won't mind proving it. Show me the will." I didn't have to. Charles had shown me months ago. He had updated everything, making sure I'd be protected after he was gone. But at that moment, I didn't say a word. Instead, I stood quietly as she ordered the locksmith to continue. The drill's sound grew louder, echoing through the house like a cruel reminder that the life I shared with Charles was being stripped away, one screw at a time. As I watched her, a strange calm settled over me. Beneath her arrogance, I saw fear, a woman desperate to control something she didn't understand. That's when I realized I didn't have to fight her anger with anger. I just had to let the truth speak for itself, and I already had the key that would do exactly that. The sound of that drill bit grinding into the front door echoed through my chest like a slow heartbeat of destruction. Each turn of the metal against the lock felt personal, like Rebecca was tearing apart the last piece of the life Charles and I had built together. I stood in the living room, gripping the edge of a chair to steady myself, while she paced with her arms crossed and that same cruel satisfaction on her face. The locksmith, a man named Alan, looked uneasy, glancing back and forth between us as if hoping one of us would tell him to stop. "Rebecca," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this isn't the way to do this. We should sit down, talk, and go through the will properly." She let out a dry laugh. "You think I don't know how this works? I already saw the copy my father's lawyer sent me. You got your share, Nora. But this house, is part of the Whitman estate, and I'm the only Whitman left." I took a deep breath. "Your father changed his will last year. He made sure everything was clear." She turned sharply, her voice rising. "Oh, please. My father wouldn't have left his own daughter with nothing." The way she said nothing made my stomach twist. It wasn't about love or loss for her. It was about winning, about control. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't grief. It was greed disguised as righteousness. Alan, still crouched near the door, cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, are you sure I should keep going? This doesn't feel right." Rebecca snapped her fingers at him. "Do your job. I'm paying you." I could tell he didn't want to, but he turned back to his work. The drill whined again, louder this time, sending small flakes of metal scattering across the floor. The sound made me flinch. "Charles and I built this home together," I said quietly, my voice trembling with emotion. "Every wall, every garden, every memory in here belongs to us both. He wanted me to live here for the rest of my days." Rebecca spun around, her face hard. "He also wanted me to have what's rightfully mine. He wouldn't want me left with scraps while his second wife gets everything." Her words stung. "You talk like this house is a trophy," I said, "but it's not. It's a home, and you have no right to take it from me." She crossed her arms and smirked. "We'll see about that. Once these locks are changed, you won't have a say anymore." I felt anger start to rise, but I forced myself to breathe. Charles had once told me, "Don't let anger speak for you, Nora. Let truth do that." And that's exactly what I planned to do. Rebecca started walking through the house, inspecting everything like she was already its owner. She ran her hand over the fireplace mantel, picked up a framed photo of Charles and me, and scoffed. "You really wasted no time replacing my mother, didn't you?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "Your father and I found love again when we both needed it most. It doesn't erase the love he had for her." She dropped the frame back onto the mantel carelessly. The glass cracked slightly at the corner. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from reacting. Alan finally stood up, wiping his hands. "The lock's almost out," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Once I replace it, you'll need to give me new keys." Rebecca looked straight at me. "You can hand over yours now, Nora, or we'll just make sure you don't have any to hand over." I walked toward her slowly, refusing to look away. "You're making a mistake." She tilted her head, mocking. "No. You made the mistake of thinking you could keep this house." The tension in the room was so thick it felt hard to breathe. I looked past her to the photo of Charles on the wall. His eyes, gentle, even in a picture, seemed to remind me that truth always has its moment. That's when I decided to stop pleading and start acting. I turned and walked to the hallway where the wooden cabinet stood, the same one where Charles kept his documents. My hands were steady now as I opened the drawer and pulled out the folder he had given me before he died. I remembered his exact words that day. "Keep this safe, Nora. When the time comes, you'll know why." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "What's that supposed to be?" "Proof," I said simply. She laughed, a sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. What? Some old love letters? You think sentiment will win this? I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the folder gently on the dining table, opened it, and pulled out 2 keys, one to the house and another smaller, silver one that gleamed under the light. I could feel her watching, confused. What are those? She asked, her voice tense now. I met her gaze. If you believe you're entitled to everything, Rebecca, then you should take the key your father left for you. Her brows furrowed. What are you talking about? The one thing he wanted you to have, I said, holding the smaller key between my fingers. For the first time, she looked unsure. The locksmith paused, watching silently. I could see a flicker of uncertainty cross her face, the arrogance beginning to fade. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I gave her a small, calm smile. If I were bluffing, why would your father have told me to keep this key safe? Her eyes darted to the folder, then back at me. What is that key for? I closed my hand around it. You'll find out soon enough. The room fell silent. Even the locksmith didn't dare move. Rebecca's confidence cracked just slightly, but enough for me to see that for the first time, she wasn't sure she was in control anymore. And that was the moment everything started to change. Rebecca stood frozen, her eyes flicking between the small silver key in my hand and the folder lying open on the table. For the first time that day, the smug confidence on her face began to crack. The locksmith, Alan, straightened his back, clearly sensing the tension shifting in the room. The sound of his tools clinking together was the only thing breaking the silence. What key is that? Rebecca demanded finally, her voice sharper now but edged with uncertainty. I held the key up so the light caught it. It's the key your father wanted you to have, I said softly. He mentioned it in his will. Her eyebrows knitted together. That's not possible. I read the will. I gave a small, calm smile. No, Rebecca. You read what you wanted to read. You didn't go through everything. Her arms crossed, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. You're lying. I stepped closer, still holding the key between us. You think you know what your father left behind, but you didn't. Know him as well as you think. He was a man who planned for everything, even this moment. Alan shifted his weight, looking at Rebecca carefully. Maybe you should check before we go any further, he said gently. Rebecca turned to him sharply. Stay out of it. But her voice wavered, and it was clear she was no longer sure of herself. I could see her trying to piece together what this might mean. The daughter who thought she had complete control was beginning to feel it slip through her fingers. Go ahead, open the folder, I said. Everything your father arranged is in there. His lawyer sent me copies after the funeral, just as he said he would. She hesitated before walking toward the table. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside were the official documents, the deed to the house, the updated will, and a small note in Charles's handwriting. I had read that note many times over the past week, but seeing it now in her hands gave it new power. She unfolded it and read aloud, her voice faltering. To my daughter, Rebecca, I leave the property that once belonged to your mother's family. It's fully yours now, free of debt. Take care of it. She looked up, her face pale. This can't be right. It's right, I said quietly. Your father made sure you'd have something of your own. That's the property by the river, the one your mother's family owned years ago. He spent months restoring it before he passed. He wanted you to have it, to build something new there. But this house, Rebecca, this was his and mine. He left it to me. Rebecca blinked rapidly, her face changing from confusion to disbelief. No, that property is worthless. It's just an old storage lot with a rundown cabin. He wouldn't do that. I met her eyes steadily. He did. He told me himself. He wanted you to have something meaningful, not just money or walls. He said it would remind you where you came from, not what you lost. She stared at me, speechless. The fight that had burned in her all day seemed to fade as reality sank in. Her father hadn't forgotten her, but he also hadn't given her what she thought she deserved. Alan cleared his throat softly. So, ma'am, do you still want me to change the locks? Rebecca spun toward him, her face flushed with anger. Just give us a minute. He nodded, and quietly stepped back toward the door, clearly ready to leave the second he could. Rebecca turned back to me, her voice trembling. You must have convinced him to change it. You made him do this. I shook my head. No, Rebecca. I didn't have to convince him of anything. He made his decision long before he got sick. He said he wanted both of us to have peace when he was gone. Peace? She spat. You call this peace? He gave you everything and left me scraps. He gave you something far more valuable than you realize, I said gently. That property meant everything to your mother's family. He restored it for you so you could start again. You wanted this house, but what he left you was a chance to build your own life, not live in someone else's shadow. She fell silent, her eyes darting between the note and the key. Her breathing quickened, and I could see the cracks in her anger giving way to something else. Shame, maybe, or guilt. She looked smaller somehow, not the confident woman who had arrived at my door demanding control, but a lost daughter who had mistaken ownership for love. I placed the silver key gently on the table between us. This is yours, I said softly. Your father wanted you to have it. Take it, Rebecca. She stared at it for a long moment, then slowly reached out and picked it up. Her fingers closed around it, but her expression wasn't triumphant. It was uncertain, almost hollow. She whispered, He really left the house to you? Yes, I said, because this was our home, and because he trusted me to protect what we built together. The room was silent again. Even the sound of the clock ticking on the wall felt distant. Finally, Rebecca turned away, her shoulders slumping as she walked toward the door. Keep your house, she said quietly. It's not worth it anyway. Alan opened the door for her, relief flooding his face as the cool air from outside rushed in. She stepped out without looking back. As the door closed, I exhaled slowly, realizing my hands were still shaking. The storm that had started with noise and anger ended in quiet. I walked to the table and picked up Charles's note, running my fingers over the words he had written. He had always said he wanted to protect both of us in his own way, and in that moment, I finally understood. He had. The door had barely closed behind Rebecca before the silence of the house settled again, thick and heavy. The air still carried the scent of the locksmith's metal tools and the faint whir of the drill that had nearly torn through my front door. I stood in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding in my chest, but not from fear anymore. It was from the strange mix of sadness, relief, and vindication that followed when truth finally wins over deceit. I could see Alan still standing near the entryway, clearly unsure what to do next. His hands were half-packed with his tools, his eyes flicking nervously between me and the door Rebecca had just stormed out of. I gave him a small nod. You can stop now, I said softly. The house doesn't need new locks anymore. He exhaled, a quiet breath of relief, and gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry about all that, ma'am. I didn't want to make trouble. I just do what I'm told. You didn't do anything wrong, I replied. You showed more decency in 10 minutes than she did in 30 years. He gave me a respectful nod and picked up his box. Before leaving, he paused by the door and said, Your husband must have been a good man. Not many plan that far ahead for the people they love. I smiled faintly, though my eyes stung with tears. He was, I said. He really was. When he left, I closed the door gently and locked it myself, using the same key Rebecca had wanted to take from me. For the first time since Charles's death, the house felt safe again, like it belonged to me, not just legally, but emotionally. I walked slowly through each room, touching the furniture, the framed photographs, the familiar corners that had been ours. In the hallway, I stopped in front of a picture of Charles and me from our 10th anniversary. We were sitting on the porch, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. His eyes, warm and full of kindness, stared back at me now. Thank you, I whispered to the photo. You knew exactly what you were doing. I thought about Rebecca's face when she read his note, that pale, shocked expression when she realized her father hadn't given her the house she wanted, but instead something deeper, something she didn't understand yet. He had known her heart better than she knew it herself. He had seen her obsession with control and tried to leave her something that might humble her. As I walked back to the dining table, the documents still lay there in neat piles. I picked them up, one by one, rereading the will. Everything was clear. The property by the river belonged entirely to Rebecca, but the house and its land were in my name. There was no loophole, no gray area, no room for her to twist the truth. Charles had made sure of it. I found myself thinking about that old property, the one by the river. I had only been there twice, years ago, when Charles had started fixing it up. It was a modest piece of land with a small cabin, surrounded by tall trees and open sky. He used to say, "This is where peace lives, Nora. It's not much, but it's pure." Now it was Rebecca's. I wondered if she would ever see what he saw there, or if she'd let her pride blind her forever. A few hours passed before there was another knock at the door. I hesitated for a second, half expecting Rebecca to return, but when I opened it, I saw not her, but Mr. Green, Charles's attorney. He was an older man, kind-faced, holding a leather folder. "Mrs. Whitman," he greeted, "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to make sure you received the updated documents. Charles asked me to deliver one last letter personally." I stepped aside and he walked in. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Charles's handwriting. Just seeing his penmanship again made my throat tighten. "Thank you," I said quietly. "She was here earlier, Rebecca. She tried to take the house." Mr. Green sighed. "Charles worried that might happen. He wanted to make sure you'd have everything you needed to protect yourself." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a short handwritten letter, dated only a few weeks before he passed. It read, "My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, it means my time has come. I know Rebecca's anger has never been easy for you, but I hope one day she understands that I did not choose between you. I only wanted both of you to have what you truly needed. This house is your heart, Nora. You made it a home. You gave me peace, and that's why I'm leaving it to you. As for Rebecca, I gave her a chance to find peace of her own. Maybe one day she'll see that love is not measured in walls or deeds, but in what we build with the time we're given. Love always, Charles." Tears filled my eyes as I read his words, each one a reminder of the man who had loved with both strength and grace. Mr. Green waited quietly as I wiped my eyes. "He really thought of everything," I said softly. "He did," Mr. Green replied. "He trusted you to handle things with dignity. I believe he was right." After he left, I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the same folder Rebecca had tried to claim as hers. Then I walked outside to the front porch. The evening sky was fading into gold and pink, the air calm and cool. I stood there for a long time, breathing it in, finally free of the fear that had haunted me since Charles's passing. Rebecca had come into this house believing she could take everything from me, but all she left with was a single key, one that would lead her to something she wasn't ready to value. Maybe one day she would. Maybe that was Charles's way of teaching her a lesson he never got the chance to say in person. As I locked the front door one last time that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The home wasn't just a legal possession, it was a promise kept. I turned off the lights, whispered a quiet goodnight to Charles, and smiled. Justice didn't come in loud arguments or courtroom battles. It came quietly, through love, preparation, and a simple silver key that held more truth than any lock could hide. The morning after everything happened, I woke up to a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't the heavy, uneasy silence that had filled the house since Charles passed. This quiet was gentle, like a breath after a long storm. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, hitting the old wooden table where his documents still sat neatly stacked. For the first time, I didn't feel the weight of fear or uncertainty pressing on my chest. I felt safe. I felt like I belonged again. I made myself a cup of coffee and walked onto the porch. The garden Charles and I planted together years ago was starting to bloom again. Roses, tulips, and daisies swaying softly in the morning breeze. It felt like the house itself was healing, just as I was. The air smelled fresh, filled with spring, and I could almost imagine his voice teasing me gently. "You see, Nora, even the flowers know when it's time to start over." The memory brought tears to my eyes, but this time, they weren't from grief. They were from gratitude. Charles hadn't just left me this house. He'd left me a chance to live freely, to protect what we built, and to remember that love doesn't end with death. It lives on in the choices we make afterward. Later that week, I received a call from Mr. Green, the lawyer. "I thought you should know," he said. "Rebecca came by the office today. She signed the papers for the Riverside property." I paused. "Did she seem all right?" He sighed. "She looked humbled, I suppose. Quieter than usual. She said she's thinking of selling it, but she wasn't sure yet. Maybe time will change her mind." After we hung up, I found myself hoping that someday she'd see the meaning behind that property. Charles hadn't meant to punish her. He wanted to guide her. He had left her a key not to something luxurious or grand, but to something that required care, patience, and a little humility. Perhaps one day she would realize that what she saw as worthless was actually her father's last lesson in love and responsibility. A few days later, as I organized the house, I found one of Charles's old notebooks tucked inside a drawer. It was filled with sketches and measurements of the Riverside cabin, notes about repairs, and even a small drawing of how he envisioned the garden there. At the bottom of one page, he had written in his neat handwriting, "For Rebecca, a place to build her peace." I smiled when I read it, touched by his endless hope that one day, even after he was gone, his daughter might find her way back to peace. That was the kind of man Charles was, always planning, always believing people could change. In the evenings, I began a new routine. I'd light a candle near his picture, sit on the porch, and write in a small journal, something I'd started to help myself heal. I wrote about my days, my feelings, and the lessons this whole ordeal had taught me. One night, I wrote, "You don't realize how strong you are until the truth is tested. And when you choose peace over revenge, you win more than any argument ever could." Over time, the neighbors began checking in more often. They had heard bits and pieces of what happened, and their kindness reminded me that good people still outnumber the selfish ones. My friend Clara came by one afternoon with a pie, saying, "You know, Nora, you handled that situation better than anyone I know. Most people would have yelled, fought, or kicked her out, but you stayed calm. That's strength." Her words stayed with me. I hadn't felt strong in the beginning. I had felt helpless, broken, and small. But standing up for myself didn't require shouting or anger. It required quiet confidence, the kind that comes when you know you're standing on the side of truth. Weeks turned into months, and the ache of loss slowly began to fade into something softer. Life didn't go back to the way it was. It never could, but it became something new. I started planting vegetables in the backyard, repainting old furniture, and hosting small tea afternoons with the neighbors. I found laughter again, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that comes when you finally let peace settle in. Sometimes when I sit by the window at night, I still think of Rebecca. I wonder if she's ever visited the cabin, if she's walked by the river her father once loved. I hope she did, because maybe standing there, surrounded by the quiet and the open sky, she might finally understand that what her father gave her wasn't a punishment. It was a gift meant to help her find herself. I keep the silver key she left behind, hanging on a small chain near the fireplace. It reminds me of that day, not with anger, but as proof that standing your ground doesn't have to mean losing your grace. It was the key to truth, to freedom, and to the kind of peace Charles always wanted us both to have. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I whispered softly, "We're okay now, Charles." The wind blew gently through the garden, carrying the faint scent of roses, and I took that as his answer. This story isn't about victory or revenge. It's about choosing peace when you're pushed to the edge, about finding your strength when others try to take it from you. It's about learning that love, real love, protects even after it's gone. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the strength it takes to stand your ground with grace, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. Every story shared here is a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and strong enough to change everything.